there's nothing like cracking that cellophane and pulling that record out. It just smells great.
Welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Non-stop hardcore energy.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Unlike any other.
With your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bod Father.
Man, this stuff rocks.
Hey, this is Edwin Outwater, conductor of S&M2, and I am here on BODS Mayhem Hour.
The views and opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of BODS Mayhem Radio Network, its staff, affiliates, or sponsors. Parental discretion is advised. Welcome to BODS Mayhem Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bod Father. And as always, I'm bringing you guys and gals awesome interviews. Today, it's an honor and a very, very huge privilege to welcome Edwin Outwater, conductor of the San Francisco Symphony, the conductor behind Metallica's S&M2 two-night event that took place September 5th and 6th at the Chase Center. So the S&M2 concert featured the first live performances of Michael Kamen's original arrangements in 20 years, plus the first ever Metallica/San Francisco Symphony renditions of songs written and released since the original S&M, with new orchestral charts by Bruce Coughlin. And I hope I said that right. So Edwin, my man, you are the man behind the, everything going on here. So how you doing, dude?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Yeah, the concert was about a year ago, so lots of memories.
I would say so, man. I would say so. We're going to dive into all this stuff, too, because I am very, very interested in all this. And how have you been doing, and what have you been up to during this crazy pandemic other than talking and promoting the San Francisco Symphony and Metallica's S&M2, possibly, man? What's been going on?
That's a good question. I've been trying to keep sane with no concerts since March. But, musicians are very resourceful. So one big piece of news is I was appointed music director of the San Francisco Conservatory, which is great. So on the classical side, I'll be doing lots of work in San Francisco. And, I haven't, a lot of us, it's been a lot of talking and interviewing and online things. I ran an online conducting masterclass as well. And I was just in Los Angeles recently, back in the studio. I was working on kind of a side project actually with Kirk Hammett. So that was really fun.
During this pandemic, what have you been doing, though, to keep yourself sane? I mean, I'm sure you're practicing and things like that, but are you doing something out of the ordinary that you thought you wouldn't maybe doing?
I think, it's when you're on the road all the time, there are some things you miss. And so, for instance, I love practicing piano, and I'm putting in a lot more hours than I used to, and that's been really, really, really cool. I've enjoyed that. I've been writing a little bit more, writing music and kind of fooling around with new kind of software and programs and getting faster at kind of putting music out that's written down. And I've been doing crazy pandemic things, like I'm reading War and Peace, like a lot of other, just because I have the time to do it. In fact, I read Stephen King's The Stand, and War and Peace back to back. So like what is it like reading two 1,000 plus page novels in a row? I think there was no other time in my life I could have possibly done that, And so, I baked a little bit, made some good cocktails, got fat, got thinner, all the usual.
Yeah, I've gotten more bodacious, as I should say. So that means more voluptuous.
Yes, voluptuous indeed.
What made you want to become a musician or even be part of a symphony? What was that spark, or what led you down that path, man?
Well, I grew up in a music family. My grandmother worked for Ella Fitzgerald for many years, the great jazz singer. My dad worked for Warner Records. And I was kind of surrounded by rock and jazz music on recording and in concert. And then classical music I kind of got into in the public schools. I grew up in Santa Monica, California. They really encouraged in our school district us getting, instruments in hand. And I just fell in love with the bass and started playing. And that kind of led to obsession with orchestra and eventually with conducting. So music from an early age, classical music from my teens. And because my dad worked for a record company, I was able to hear a lot of music for free. So I was kind of an adventurous listener, even as a kid. So I just loved it. I went to Harvard undergraduate, and music is a hard career. So I got into Harvard. I was really psyched about that. And I said, well, I'm going to try to be a musician. And if that doesn't work out, I can always fall back on that degree. Luckily, I didn't have to. So I was able to kind of make it as a musician, which is still kind of an amazing thing to think about these days.
What was the actual hardest part of taking all these classes and studying all this music for you personally? What was the hardest part that made you kind of think, oh, dude, I really want to go through this?
Yeah, I think, conducting is really about how you interact with people, and you kind of have to win over the orchestra, which is 100 people. And for me, the hardest part was I was kind of weirdly, even though you want to be on stage and conduct, I was also kind of shy. And so I think for a while I was kind of less successful as a conductor because I wasn't able to kind of let it all out in a certain sense. And I kind of learned how to do that. And it was definitely a challenge kind of becoming, from an introverted person into kind of an extroverted stage presence for me. It wasn't a natural thing. It took a long time. But those hard struggles are what really make you do it. But it was, the classes were hard. I mean, music is always hard, and in a sense, every concert you do, you always have kind of, oh, I don't know if I did that so great or this or that. But that's just kind of the nature of being a musician, is always never being satisfied. So that doesn't bother me so much. But that process of maybe conducting stage presence was really the hardest journey for me.
Yeah, I can't even play Mary Had a Little Lamb on a guitar and somebody else could pick it up and make it seem easy. And I'm going, no, I don't know how you're doing that. And I've tried, and I get so frustrated.
Yeah. I mean, music is always frustrating. You just got to hang in, after months and years. And I think doing it every day, it's the consistency is really important too. Mm-hmm. But, there was a point maybe when I was in my 40s, early 40s, I'm in my late 40s now, where I felt, okay, I'm kind of smooth as a conductor now. And I started, when I was in my maybe 19 years old. So it's just a long thing. And, you can always be better. And that's always kind of what motivates me. How can I be better? And it's kind of the fun of it in a certain sense. And it's also the frustration. It's a mix.
Any bands that someone would be surprised you like, or style of music you like, especially like Metallica, man? Let's talk about that a little bit. What got you into those guys, and what would be, what would surprise somebody?
I mean, I'm a really eclectic listener. Like I said, when I was a kid, I heard lots of music. So I kind of started out in more of a rock and roll world. I loved Zeppelin and Van Halen and all that stuff. As I got a little bit older, I got into more kind of punk. I'm an 80s kid, so a lot of punk and new wave stuff. So I loved the Clash and Devo and Talking Heads and all of that. And then, I didn't give up any music. I just kind of gathered more music around me. And for Metallica, I did like them a lot, especially in the 90s. I remember listening to them on road trips. I would have to drive from LA to Santa Barbara, a 2-hour drive all the time. And I remember just Injustice for All and Master of Puppets in my cassette player. Yeah. But I wasn't an expert, and I wasn't as into metal, at that time. Metallica actually was one of the few metal bands I listened to a lot. And once I got hired, asked to do this project, I really immersed myself in lots of metal. Not only the bands that were kind of our contemporaries of Metallica's, the Anthrax and Slayer and all those guys, and Megadeth, and some other more recent bands like Power Trip, who I really liked. And then even Maiden and Black Sabbath were not on my radar as much as I knew it a little bit, but I've since the Metallica thing, metal has become a much more part of my daily listening kind of thing. And it's been a great journey. There's always new music to discover, but I may be listening to metal one day and then blues the other day, or kind of David Bowie or classical, or it just really depends. I love kind of how wide the world of music is.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Mr. Gale, who we lost from the Mighty Power trip here recently.
Yeah,
so
I was so sad to hear that. What an amazing band. So
yes,
I hope they can pick up the pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a one of a kind singer, if that makes sense. You know, he poured his heart
in that
out.
genre. Yeah, it's an amazing voice.
Yes.
I was really shocked to read that. Yeah. So, because I was asking some people who are really kind of into the newer kind of metal thrash and Power Trip. As I was kind of doing research, like who should I listen to now? And they said, "Oh, Power Trip," and I was really taken by that band. I thought they were just amazing.
Mm-hmm. I know we lost.
And hopefully they can maintain and forge a new path.
I know we lost Michael Kamen in 1999, who worked on S&M with the San Francisco Symphony. How did you come about getting the conductor role for the symphony? Let's talk about that a little bit. How did all this wind up as the new conductor, man?
Well, I had a long relationship with the San Francisco Symphony. I worked there since 2001. I had become, or still am in some ways, the guy who might lead the orchestra on more of the crossover stuff or more of the crazy rock adventures. And so, the boss of the San Francisco Symphony at the time, it was Michael Tilson Thomas, who also appears on the concert. And he and Lars definitely had initial conversations about S&M2. And Michael was going to do a lot of stuff on the record or, have an appearance, but he was never going to do the whole concert. And so he had hired me as assistant. He thought I would be the perfect person to kind of carry the symphony torch. In the meantime, he had heart surgery the summer before S&M2 and was kind of out of commission. So I was kind of deputized to help plan the whole thing from the symphony side, which was really amazing. The planning of S&M was almost as fun as the concert because it was just such an interesting and complicated process and, getting to meet the band. But that's, I was kind of the guy to do a concert like this in San Francisco. So I was very lucky to be tapped to do S&M2.
And plus, for the ones who don't know, Michael worked in film scoring and had performed with musicians like Bryan Adams, David Gilmour, Kate Bush, and more. Was there any talk of paying tribute to Michael working with Metallica previously on S&M? Was there any talk of doing a tribute during S&M2 possibly that we may not have saw, maybe, or no?
I didn't think it was, explicitly that there was going to be a tribute. Maybe there should have been. I think, I think just the fact that half the music we played were the original Caymans was meant to be a tribute to begin with, that he had done such an amazing job, and that we wanted to really replay, some of his best arrangements of the Metallica songs. And one really moving thing that happened to me is in one of the nights, one of the fan club members had a big banner kind of Michael Kamen, right in the front row. And it was so touching, to see that. And after the concert, that person contacted me and sent me the banner, which was just the most lovely gesture. I think he was from Korea. And we hung it. It's now hanging backstage at the San Francisco Symphony. So I think that there's so many of us, carrying the torch for Michael Kamen in this project. He, many people had done these things before, orchestra and rock band, obviously, but somehow you just got the right balance of the orchestra interacting with Metallica, and I think was just such an amazing kind of imagination, because when you have a band as loud and as heavy as Metallica, fitting anything else into that sound world is really difficult, and he figured out a way to do that. And Bruce Coughlin, who took over with the new Metallica songs, definitely has his own style, but very specifically paid tribute to the way that Michael Kamen went about doing it and wanted his new arrangements to be in the spirit of Michael Kamen's original arrangements. And I think that's really cool.
And I want to say this before we move on. I think this is a nice mixture of rock and orchestra blended together. Like you said, I think this is a big, huge thing for all the music world to see, that these two styles of music can coexist. I think this is beautiful what you guys have done previously and now today.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think, for a lot of us musicians, and I know my friends in Metallica feel this way in the band and orchestra musicians, music is music. And of course there are different genres, and there are some things, Metallica can do, that we don't do in classical music. And there are some kind of colors and atmosphere that we can, as classical musicians, can add to rock. And it was just the right balance. You can have the idea, but to actually make it work the way it has worked in both S&M1 and S&M2 required a kind of magic touch. And I think definitely Michael Kamen was the original kind of person. And I also think that Metallica, the fact that they're always willing to try new things and to have adventures and to kind of put themselves at risk in a certain sense, or to take musical risks, was the other kind of magic ingredient of that collaboration. And I also think Metallica's music is, kind of a lot of it just is it's melodic, a lot of it. And I think it lends itself particularly well to classical music. Songs like One or Outlaw, they have the space and the breadth and the kind of epic quality that orchestras really thrive in.
Working on S&M2, was it somewhat challenging working on these songs, or was it pretty smooth from possibly having criteria from S&M?
I think it was smooth, and we were all in different places when we were putting the new orchestrations together. So that Metallica was on tour in Europe, I was in Chicago, Greg Fiddleman, the producer, was in Los Angeles probably, and Bruce Coughlin, who's doing the new arrangements, was in New York. So we were all kind of on phone calls. Of course, now in the pandemic, this is all we do. But at that time, I was kind of amazed at the technology that Bruce would kind of create an audio mock-up of his arrangements of the Metallica songs. He would send it to the band through Greg Fiddleman. We'd all talk about it and make some changes. And a lot of it went really smoothly, considering that, everyone was on the move so much. The one song that went through a lot of revision was Unforgiven 3, which was the song that James sang without the rest of the band, just with the orchestra. And he really, I think we had 8 different versions we sent to James until we were all happy with it. And so that one was, and for a lot of the fans, that's a very special number on S&M2 for sure. And, that was one of the ones, and it wasn't that it was bad, but it was just, it was to begin with, it was just a new adventure for James. So he really wanted to feel, okay, this is it. And I that was fascinating to see that song evolve, the orchestral part evolve, over a period of weeks, based on the feedback back and forth between James and the arranger.
Was there any song you wanted to push the limits on with the symphony, or maybe change from the previous S&M stuff that you guys worked on, or Michael had worked on with them?
Well, 2 songs changed in the arrangements of Sandman and Master of Puppets are by Bruce Coughlin now. Though Bruce told me to mention that he kept a lot of the Michael Kamen stuff on Sandman, but changed it slightly. So those were redone from the original S&M1. And from my end, I listened to S&M1 a million times, and I kind of saw where the orchestra really, where I could get the orchestra to punch even more. So I was definitely listening to the original versions and seeing if I could get something different, out of it, even the same music that Kamen wrote, or even something like, the Ecstasy of Gold, the Morricone piece that opens the concert. I do it a little slower than he did, and then I speed up at the end, like little things like that, just so it's not exactly the same. Not that I didn't like what was done before. In fact, I really liked what was done before, but I just wanted to kind of give it its own spin and not just completely duplicate the way it had been done before. And I also think Metallica was playing a lot of the songs differently. Some were faster, it was, and I think they were, as they say in interviews, more confident going into S&M2. So I felt, especially the second night, they were really loose and just let it rip in a way that you don't hear on S&M1. But some people might like S&M1 better. So it's a lot of, it's great to have 2 versions of it. I mean, if you really dig deep, even, different versions of the same song. The engineering is different. The producing is different. The band is playing different. The orchestra is doing different things. There's a lot to compare and contrast for sure.
But that's good. You have one album, the original. Now you've got S&M2. That shows you that they want to take it to another level. They want to add more to it and kick more ass with it, as I should say.
They did. Yeah. And they wanted to learn a classical song, as you may notice. So, the things that are new on S&M2 is the orchestra has its own feature where the San Francisco Symphony plays by itself with Michael Tilson Thomas. They played the Iron Foundry where Metallica learned a classical song. And that was Metallica's idea. We were learning Metallica's songs as an orchestra, and they thought, why not turn the table for one song and learn, this crazy Russian classical piece, which they did. And again, that's a credit to Metallica that they're adventurous enough to do that, because they were on a really busy schedule coming into S&M2, just with a massive tour, and they were still willing to learn new stuff and to kind of put it out there. And then, the other thing that's unique about S&M2 is also the anesthesia pulling teeth, which was played by our principal bass Scott Pingle, which is the highlight for a lot of people. This incredible tribute to Cliff Burton. And that was also very conscious from Metallica's part, as they wanted to feature the orchestra more and the orchestra musicians more, and to make the collaboration more intimate. That also includes the stage design, which was circular in S&M2, whereas in S&M1, the band was in front, the orchestra was in back, and Metallica really wanted to eliminate that and integrate the band and the orchestra visually as well as in a sound way. So a lot of thought was put into kind of taking it to another level with S&M2, no doubt.
Did you have any favorite songs while working with Metallica on this? Did you have any favorite songs coming into this possibly that you hope that they may put on? I mean,
I kind of knew it was coming on. There are songs like, Outlaw. I think, before S&M1 was, maybe a song that fans like, but I think in both versions of S&M 1 and 2, like Outlaw has really come into its own as a really major Metallica song. It just works so well with orchestra. I think 1 also works really well with orchestra. Cthulhu works really well with orchestra. Sometimes the songs are really fast, like Master of Puppets, it's just hang on. And the fun of it is the orchestra just trying, 100 people trying to catch up with the 4 members of the band just kind of ripping it. And that's a different kind of thrill. But, I kind of lean towards the kind of the more mid-tempo, more epic stuff, as far as the most, maybe the most successful orchestra band things. But the fast stuff is pretty fun too. Moth, is really fun.
I got to say this right now, because I talked to you last week about this. I told you that Outlaw, when you listen to Outlaw, especially now, I've always loved that song. But listening to it on S&M2 with the orchestra, it just sends chills up me, to be honest with you, because I can feel it, what you guys are playing. Everybody, every single person there. And that song is just badass in general. I mean, if somebody can, if someone listens to that song by the orchestra version or the album version of it, and you don't get chills, there's something badly wrong with you in music. That is for sure.
I get chills in that piece still to this day.
Oh, yeah.
It's something, it just goes, it's a great song that it just goes farther and farther and farther, and it goes past the point where you think it's supposed to go.
Yes.
And it just, and James just sings the hell out of it. I mean, he sounded so great on that concert the whole time. And somehow he just digs in that song in a way that I find just, it makes my hair stand on end in the best sort of way. So, and there are a lot of moments like that in both of the S&Ms, and it's, haunting, or there's something very special or otherworldly about it.
I want to talk about this because, I'm not going to single out this as the best moment, but this was really a truly highlight of S&M2. Scott Pingle, who you just talked about just a minute ago, who did the anesthesia and pulling teeth, who we lost to mighty Cliff Burton a long time ago. When Scott did his bass solo with that electric bass, again, it sent chills up me because it was eerily haunting. But I mean that in a good way. He pulled that off. He pulled that off so damn good, Edwin, that Cliff would be proud. And I'm saying that right now as a fan, I'm proud because he nailed it. He hit everything perfect on it.
Yeah. And, on a bass like that, it's a lot of room to make a mistake. I mean, Scott is such a great guy and such a virtuoso musician, but, compared to the electric bass, just the space between notes is like 5 times as big on the electric, on that kind of electric acoustic hybrid he was playing. And he put so much work into it. I think he bought that bass just for this, and he, had this whole pedal set up. He put his own kind of spin on it, but it was such an incredible, he is a true Metallica fan. And the minute that there was an opportunity, like in the symphony, the word went out that Metallica wanted to see if anybody had anything to play or could do a version of a Metallica song. Scott came running to me and say, I have this incredible idea. And watching that whole thing take place, he auditioned the piece essentially for the 4 members of the band at HQ a few days before the concert. They were just so touched. And, the late Ray, Cliff's dad was there as well. He has since passed away, but he was at those S&M concerts and was so touched, by what Scott was doing. So the fact that Cliff's dad got to see that and got to meet Scott and, or if you talk, listen to Rob Trujillo talk about Scott, we're all just kind of the hero of the night in a certain sense.
That was going to be my next question. What was the guy's reaction to hearing Scott play this bass solo like this? What was their reactions?
Oh yeah, their jaws dropped. I mean, they were just kind of like couldn't believe it. And I remember the minute it stopped, there was just like a silence, and like it was like almost like dead silence. And then I think Kirk said, "Oh, Cliff would be so proud of this," and it was just touching. It was emotional, in the room. So just, and from what I understand, I mean, I was on stage, but just the emotions of the fans, when this happened, everyone cheered for it, but lots of tears and memories, and it was haunting. And that's the magic of music. It just is these incredible kind of almost spiritual experiences that music at its best can conjure up.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Scott, buddy, you pulled it off. I think nobody going to touch you on this one, sir. You did a phenomenal job, so kudos to you.
Yeah.
What do you hope, Edwin, everyone takes away from this experience who takes a dab into this and listen to it, man? What do you hope they get from it?
I hope they're just are uplifted by it. I mean, that was the feeling that I felt, that somehow this combination made the music fly. I mean, the music was good to begin with. So I don't think, Metallica doesn't need an orchestra to be amazing, but I think somehow that orchestral sound, it kind of lifts you up in a certain way. And that's why I love orchestras. And I think what people are getting from this is these kind of like I said, spiritual experiences or uplifting or chills, from this live experience. And it comes through quite well, I think, on the recording. I mean, and kudos to Greg Fiddleman who produced it, that he had to deal with all these different instruments and get it perfect. And I think people come away just somehow happy and inspired from this concert. And what more could you ask for, as a musician? And just the appreciation, that fans have shown me, none of whom would have known me, before I, became involved in this project. It's just very touching to me. And it makes me really, really happy to see that it's, a part of history and it will continue to inspire people. I mean, S&M1, certainly I was hearing about that. If you're a classical musician and you're in a cab and you say you're a classical musician, it's more likely that they'll, it's just as likely that the person driving the car will say, "Oh, I love, S&M." But they also say, or they like Beethoven. It's probably one or the other.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it doesn't shock me at all that Metallica's crossed over with an orchestra, because they've done many instrumentals on their albums, and that was led to by Cliff, who got them into that. So it doesn't shock me.
And I think, there's more to come. I think there's an interest. I think the band was so they just had such a great time. And I've been trying to get them to do like orchestral versions of, songs like Orion or something. I think that would be amazing. And, I think there's definitely, hopefully more to come. I think they were thrilled with how it went, and it was an adventure they all really enjoyed.
What's your take on seeing bands as big as Metallica, Pink Floyd, crossing over and working with the symphony? What's your take on that, man? Would you like to see more bands break that over?
Yeah, I mean, if they think it would help, sure. I mean, they don't have to, but I think I like risk in artistic things, so, I mean, working with the orchestra involves risk, it involves creativity, it involves getting out of your comfort zone. And so I think, there are bands who do the same thing, for 25 years and that's great. Maybe it's still awesome, but I think it's somewhat healthier to always try to mix it up. And maybe it's orchestras, maybe it's electronics, who knows? But I think just doing it for the sake of doing it, there has to be some sort of desire and reason, and I think for Metallica, I think it was Michael Kamen's idea originally, and then they kind of got into it. But sure, I mean, I'm always up for more adventures. And I know just working with musicians, why don't we try, what if we put an orchestral sound on this, or it's all possible. So breaking out of your comfort zone is never a bad thing for an artist or a band or a classical musician. For me, and for me, I love working with rock musicians because it gets me out of my normal thing, and it's super fun.
The first night when this was going to go live, he was going to do the live show. Tell me about the emotions, man, running through you. Was you nervous at all? Was it butterflies in the stomach? Was you saying, "Oh man, this is huge. This is Metallica, and this is us. I want to make the symphony sound good too."
I mean, we had a lot of rehearsals, so we felt pretty confident that it would go well. And the crew, I have to really give a shout out to all the people running sound, the people running monitors. And this is both on the symphony side and the Metallica side. Just if you can imagine that the sound setup for this, how complicated it is and how many things could go wrong, it's kind of staggering. So my fear was, my monitors would crap out or, something like some sound thing would happen. And nothing did. It was really solid both nights. And I was just so grateful for that. So knowing that we had done the work and rehearsed, you go on stage just, and knowing that this concert will go down in history, pretty certainly, you want to have fun. So I was definitely in a fun kind of kick-ass frame of mind when I walked out, not in a fearful state of mind.
So we got Halloween coming up, good sir. What movies are you interested in? What movies have you not seen that you want to see? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Are you a horror person?
Oh, buddy, you better believe it.
Oh, really? Well, that's a whole nother talk. I became very good friends with Kirk Hammett actually through our mutual love of horror movies. Mm. So Shudder, I have Shudder, this old 80s movie called Fade to Black just came out, which is kind of exciting, which I want to see. It's about a guy who goes and murders people dressed up as different horror characters. It's a pretty obscure one. I'm interested in this movie Color Out of Space that just came out online, which is pretty cool. I don't know. What are the big horror movies coming up this Halloween?
That's a good question. COVID has really hurt it a lot. There's going to be the new Halloween, but that's going to get pushed back till next year.
Yeah.
I was very, very excited to see part 2 because the first one that came out that got redone by this last group, they nailed it. They did everything excellent in my book. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. Yeah, so I'm kind of digging through the old stuff right now, for sure, for horror movies. But Shudder is really cool. I'm really glad it's out there because this is like a huge, and especially Halloween, they just pour all these movies into it. So I watched this 4-hour documentary of 80s horror movies recently, and that Fade to Black was on. I never even heard of it, and a lot of other movies. So I wrote them all down on my phone and then kind of going through and one by one and checking things out. But my all-time favorite kind of dark movie is not a horror movie per se, but I just love it. It's called Night of the Hunter. Do you know that movie with Robert Mitchum? I think so. It's kind of a noir movie, but he's a homicidal preacher
that kind of marries women and kills them, and then he kind of chases these two kids kind of get away, set in the South. It is one of the most beautiful, creepy movies I've ever seen. I watch it every year at Halloween for sure.
I want to watch Black Christmas. I think it's from 1976.
Oh, that's great.
I think.
I saw it for the first time. Yeah, I loved it. Loved it.
Was it 76 or the 80s, Edwin, when it came out? I want to say 76.
I think it's late 70s. Yeah, it was definitely one of the first slasher movies, right?
Yeah.
And it had that kind of killer's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good. I think it was remade too, and the remake was supposed to be also quite good.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another movie.
Last year.
I'll tell you another movie that I think is very, very underrated, and it's been out forever. Silver Bullet. So underrated werewolf movie.
The werewolf.
Yes.
Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
All right, I will check that out.
With the Gary Busey in there.
Oh, he's in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen King, werewolves, and Gary Busey, I'm in. Thank you for the recommendation. I'll let you know.
So what do you have coming down the pipe possibly that we can look out for? Stay in touch with you, man. Well, what's going on?
Oh, who knows? Some of my stuff at the SF Conservatory will be online. It will be mostly classical stuff. And literally all my concerts have been canceled since March. And then in the orchestral world, as of January 1, nothing has been canceled yet, but, I'm not too optimistic, but maybe, I'm just waiting for the next thing. So, we had planned actually in this coming October, Kirk Hammond and I had planned a horror concert, he and I, that was going to start at the Vancouver Symphony and hopefully tour around, but that's been postponed. But yeah, you might see some stuff, kind of horror related stuff with me and Kirk, in the years ahead, if things work out well. And maybe, who knows what Metallica things will come down the pipe.
That'll be awesome.
But I'm still very much in their family, and we talk regularly, and we're scheming some things, hopefully.
That's awesome. Edwin, I wish you nothing but the best of luck, good sir. How can folks stay in touch with you personally, the symphony, all this stuff? How can they do that, man?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and all those things. And it's funny, my Instagram is now mostly Metallica fans, so I'll try to keep all that good Metallica stuff coming to you guys, and share being part of the family. But it's nice to be in touch with everybody.
Before I let you go, would you care to do a promo for my show, good sir?
I'd be very happy to. Hey, this is Edwin Outwater, conductor of S&M2, and I am here on BODS Mayhem Hour.
Everybody stick around. We got some great stuff coming up. You only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour and BODS Mayhem Hour podcast. Please check out our Facebook page. It has our podcast link, YouTube link, and be sure you subscribe to our YouTube link because you don't want to miss out on all the great interviews that we do. And also, please check out S&M2, San Francisco Symphony, everything that Edwin's doing, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you so much, Edwin, for doing this interview with me.
My great pleasure, John.
You're listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.